I'm Chris Remo from the Idle Thumbs Podcast, and this is Growing Up Geek.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the 116th episode of Growing Up Geek, the weekly podcast for geek entertainment and nostalgia. My name is Brad, and I'm joined by my brother Rob.
Huh. Yes, as I learned in concert, we all made that noise. Huh.
Oh, is that part of the PAX concert experience?
Yes, it was. It was really nice. Everybody was like, get ready, get ready. It was a song from like Chrono Cross, and in 8-bit, it was like just really like lame, like, whoa.
Yeah.
But, everybody they
amplified
amplified it, and they're just like, oh! Fists
awesome.
in the air. Everybody like knew when it was coming. It was awesome, and we'll talk about that later on this show. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I am back from Ohio. You are back from Boston. We're back.
Back.
Yeah, back
We're
in
back.
the States.
Yeah.
Well, another state.
We're both in the same state.
Are you on a regular schedule now?
I'm doing fine. I'm a little sleep deprived.
Yeah.
The trip up there is 5 hours
From Philly,
which
yeah.
is I mean, honestly, it's not too much longer than it takes to actually travel to Pittsburgh. Surprisingly,
Right.
It's a little more stressful. My tires were kind of balding.
Oh, shoot.
And,
yeah. I don't even trust my car with that kind of trip.
We got hit with all this rain, and so on the way back, like my adrenaline's going because like I'm nervous and might slip and crash. But,
White knuckle grip on the wheel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Staying like the whole
Space
last
cushion.
2 hours. So that compounds the fact that we get back at like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So the next day I was completely just a zombie. Like literally, my boss looks at me and was like, "Maybe you should go home." Like,
Oh, no. You
Yeah.
wore it right on your sleeve.
right? Or
Yeah.
it could have just been because I had this terribly bloodshot eye.
Yeah, you twittered about your rage virus eye, like your 28 days later eye, which I feel so bad for you because you went to like mingle and exchange business and, put your music inside of people's ear holes.
Right. I try to like look presentable, and
Yeah.
yet half of my left eye is completely blood red.
Yeah, so you're introducing yourself to people like, "Hi, I'm Rob the Succubus." Well, that's cool, man. I visited Ohio, not quite so exotic. Then again, maybe Boston isn't. Over the weekend, and I got to tour the house that they shot A Christmas Story at.
Cool.
And I say at because after we paid our $8 and went inside the house, we realized this is not where the inside of the movie takes place. This is not. Yeah, it was.
Wow.
That was all shot on a soundstage in Canada, which she neglected to tell us until we were like inside the living room, going, "Yeah, I don't think this is where they were." But it was still awesome to get a picture with the front of the house, and basically it's just this tiny like street in Cleveland that they sort of. I mean, you don't even park in like a parking garage; you just park sort of on the street, which is kind of neat, And you just walk up to the house, and they've converted 2 of the nearby houses into like a museum and a gift shop. And the gift shop has the most awesome collection of Christmas Story merchandise. Anything you want. A shirt that says Fudge, a hat that says Fragile, the lamp leg, of course, Red Ryder guns, bunny suits, just basically everything you'd want as a fan, which my wife is a total fan, so we enjoyed that, and we got our picture taken with the guy who delivered the leg in the movie, which is like the furthest removed celebrity, but still, he was in the movie, so hey.
Yeah, I mean, who are you going to have on call? You got to figure they're like shifting people out. You're like, all right,
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah, because it's not there is like a Christmas Story fest that they have like once a year, and the tour guide said everybody but Ralphie comes, and it's like, well, okay.
Yeah.
But Peter Billingsley is the director of Couples Retreat, if you saw that movie. He directed that, and he's actually in The Breakup, and you've probably seen him and maybe not realized that that's Ralphie still, but I'm sure he's busy. But anyway, it was really cool, and just a little bit of craziness there.
Talk about imminent domain. Like, that's got to stink for the inhabitants of those previous houses. They're like, we've come here to buy it out because this movie was so successful and you allowed it to be filmed in your neighborhood.
Well, like, and the same thing that happened to us happened to the guy who bought the house, because he saw it on eBay as the Christmas Story house, and he called the owners and said, if you take that auction down right now, I'll pay you like $50,000 more than you're asking. So they did, wisely. And when he got there, he was like, this is not the house they shot in.
Right.
So the same thing happened to him, and then he spent $200,000 to make the inside look like the house from the movie, even though it's sort of like you can't like deform the structure of a house so much. Yeah. Wow. So like things are like sort of facing the wrong angle and stuff, but oh well. Yeah, so that was
kind of squint.
Yeah, that was cool. But yeah, there were like neighbors directly next to where like Ralphie shot like the criminals moving over the fence, which I like sort of got my picture posed like I was going up over the fence. And across from me is like somebody watering their grass. I'm like, are they annoyed by this,
Nah, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta be.
So you kind of had like a geekier week than I did.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that's just such a universally loved movie. But speaking of your geek week, Penny Arcade Expo, PAX as they call it, just a big nerd party for people who don't know that is thrown by the guys who run the Penny Arcade comic strip. I mean, this sucker has ballooned out of a comic strip into now 60,000 people coming for this giant gaming convention. Much like guys might have a guys' night out, this is sort of geeks' night out, right?
Really is. But I mean, my reason for going personally was to seek employment,
right.
Because each subsequent year I've gone to a convention, I've learned a little more about being prepared. So the first convention I went to, I stunk. I was like ripping off pieces of notebook paper and giving them to people.
Yeah. So
and
now
then,
you're much more of a stone cold businessman.
Exactly. The second year I was like printed out cards, and then the third year I was like, okay, I need a portfolio to give people. So I literally spent like Friday and Saturday, like I was up early in my hotel room, like putting the final touches on a CD and like burning them. And
So let's get to that, because we have to shame you before we get into the good stuff, which is that you were there because you were there as basically this businessman. You did not attend a single panel.
But as I understand it, that was the story with a lot of people, including like heavy hitters, like because there was this situation where you had 60,000 people,
right,
and these tiny rooms that the interesting panels were in. Now, they had a large main room that people could easily fit into, but always the stuff going on in there was a little more like, oh, well, it's a concert, or it's like the Penny Arcade guys are going to draw a comic for you, or something like that. But the stuff that was like industry, the stuff which was like, our sequel's a good idea, or what about DLC, or there was, the one that I heard on the internet, which was the kind of the enforcement team from Xbox Live talking about enforcing and
I did hear that one too.
Works.
That was cool.
It cool.
I thought a good job.
Yeah, like for what they were talking about, it was really entertaining. He like opens a huge tome and is like reading like, and on the first day there was darkness and
people can check that out on the Major Nelson podcast. But you missed panels, and then you also missed Will Wheaton's giant keynote address, which I thought was great. And you mentioned watching, listening on the internet. There's a lot of stuff that you can hear online, even if you don't attend PAX, and this was fortunately one of them.
Yeah, and I watched it on YouTube, and I was, I was like swelling up even then, like with tears. He captured it perfectly right, and in retrospect, like I can remember feeling that way at PAX.
Yeah.
Without having anybody tell me about that, without having him hype it.
Yeah, let's get into that. Actually, his keynote, for those who didn't watch it, basically said that, gaming, contrary to popular belief, is the foundation of most of his like friendships.
Yeah.
And it's something that caused me to think, you know what? Geez, you're right. Like most of the people that I'm friends with, gaming is what we had in common. And it's not in that way antisocial,
Absolutely
and of course,
not.
The evidence he gives also is this giant 60,000 plus crowd of people who are there together, the community, that gaming is not antisocial. And that community is the one thing that I can't get online. And so that's the thing that I'm most interested in from you, is the people of PAX.
Yeah, I mean, really realizing that everybody there is kind of shameless and unified in their kind of
let it all hang out.
Complete nerdiness, you know.
Yeah.
And there's something like the way PAX is organized. It's different from other conventions in that it is totally about the fans.
Yeah.
So there are rooms where, for example, they'll have talks, but after all the talks are done, they'll just set up consoles in those rooms so people can just play.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like they try and make unique things that people wouldn't get anywhere else. For example, there's like a 5-on-5 Steel Battalion multiplayer match.
Yeah.
Which, for those who don't know, Steel Battalion is like a $200 game. Before even Rock Band made that make sense.
Right. It's like a tank simulator with like a giant plastic accessory.
It's a walking tank simulator, man.
Yeah.
It's this niche within a niche. It's mech combat, but
Right.
on top of that, it's a simulator. So like it's not like arcade action, and then even more, it's this giant like foot pedally 3 joystick kind of thing with toggles and switches. So it's really like this simulation, and it's like if you don't eject, it erases your save file, that kind of stuff. So
is it mostly console gaming, or like how is it broken up? Like the different nerd, sects.
There's the console gaming. There was actually kind of an arcade museum type place that had old school arcade machines. With like all these, crazy like burnt-in Pong machines, and there was like Dragon's Lair was like projected on the wall, and
That's awesome.
Cool stuff like that. There was there was D&D, obviously, tabletop gaming.
Yeah, you told me about that.
I avoided that. Side note, but there's one thing I found out that I missed while at PAX that I really was genuinely like upset about.
Right, yeah.
But I completely understand why I missed it. In the D&D area, apparently there was a Microsoft Surface table.
I know. It's so horrible when you found out later, like, oh god, I saw the picture.
If you can find the video on YouTube, it looks gorgeous, and it's the way I would totally get into D&D if it was like this, where rather than like having like somebody like have to tell you and you have to keep track of numbers, they'll move their game piece on the grid on the screen, and then the computer knows where they are. It'll send computerized enemies at them.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then they have these little discs which are physically in their hands, but they place them on the table, and menus pop up surrounding them, and they can rotate them to find like, okay, I want to cast this spell in this quadrant at this thing, and then I want to move my guy, and you see like when he moves his guy, like a line draws from where he was to where he's moving.
Oh, that's awesome.
So completely awesome, and I didn't get to see it because I wanted to stay away from D&D nerds.
Yeah, what sect did you most fit into? What
video games, obviously.
Sure, yeah. Well, it is a video gaming convention or a gaming convention, yeah.
But they like I said, games in all forms are represented there. Geeks and the kind of beanbag lounge of DS PSP players was by far the most disturbing to look at, because you just are walking by and they're literally just beanbags,
bodies
good
strewn everywhere.
Ones. Yeah, bodies just lounging around, drooling on themselves like with like a cup tucked under one of their rolls, and they're just like playing DS games. Well, and in a way, it's almost sad because you're like, dude, you're in Boston at a convention. Why are you playing this handheld game?
Right.
But on the other hand, that's what this convention is all about, because they get a chance to play with other people.
Yeah. Oh gosh, and that's probably one reason that Will Wheaton was saying, it's so hard waiting for your next PAX. Is probably because when else can you get this? Like especially as guys with jobs and relationships and stuff, like we have segmented time for video gaming, or for nerdery, But when you have just that like uninterrupted like 3 days, and it's all these other people who are like, yeah, we'll play together, you can't almost recreate that experience any other place,
It's true. And especially, I mean, we got to get onto this eventually, but there are the cosplayers there.
Yes, I was going to ask next, actually. Did you what were the maybe best and worst costumes that you saw there?
Wow, okay. Sure. I mean, I can't even identify all these people, like, because the cool thing was you might see a costume that looks kind of bad, but if you can identify it, suddenly it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like I saw somebody wearing a uniform from Mass Effect 2.
Oh, sweet.
But it was crappy material. It was kind of just like this, umbrella-esque thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I saw that and I was like, cool. Like they're wearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would see like somebody in like this huge elaborate getup of like some sort of knight outfit, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah. Right, exactly. They spend hours, but it's some anime
let's see here. There was somebody who I think was Inuyasha. It looked very good.
Okay.
Had a giant foam sword, and scared the heck out of my girlfriend because people went to take a picture of him, and he just screamed in the air, like posing.
Oh my god!
And there's like sometimes you should just do a fake scream. Like the camera's not gonna hear that.
Well, speaking of your girlfriend, she twittered something that I read that cracked me up, which was, there should be a bulge in that guy's spandex, but there isn't. Can you provide context to that?
I can't, because she had left me at that moment while I was pimping my music. She unfortunately was kind of thrown to the wolves and allowed to roam about freely.
So what was her perspective on this? Because I know she said she thought it was cool that all these people have a place to have their thing.
Yeah, and she actually got like angry at some people who were like, making fun of nerds who were there. Mm-hmm. They're like, dude, why'd you spend $50 to come here and be like, oh my gosh, look at this nerd? It's like that. This is the one safe haven they have.
It's the White Castle of Gandalf.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
And so it's really cool to see.
You can imagine a town revolting with like torches and all the nerds like shuffle back into their safe haven.
Right, exactly.
Plastics, like giant foam swords being drawn.
I know, but it really is, and you feel very good about it because there's no reason to be ashamed of stuff. I think what was interesting, as far as the costumes, the other best costumes I saw there was a Fallout 3 Steel Battalion.
Oh, dude, that's no small potatoes. Like, to try to make that.
That guy pulled it. He looked amazing. Yeah. Like, he was completely decked out, looking rad as anything.
Sweaty as anything underneath, but rad on the outside.
The other neat thing was a lot of people in costumes were actually security. Mm-hmm. So, like, people would be, like, checking your badges, but they were, like, dressed as elves.
Yeah, this is a big thing about PAX is the enforcers. Which are these helpers, basically volunteers or whatever, who make the experience pleasant for people, especially vendors that are there.
I actually think the Fallout 3 guy was an enforcer.
Oh, it's so perfect too. It just says
exactly.
enforcer, on this guy. It's like, now that is an enforcer.
Lastly, let's see here. There was a Bayonetta costume there, which was disturbingly well done. Like, you were like, holy. First of all, this girl was like 7 feet tall.
Right.
And then
After
she had
heels.
the tall hair and the heels, so you're even more like, oh my god. Well, it turns out that I think that was actually a legitimate booth, like babe from Sega,
quote unquote.
So I wasn't too surprised then. But the thing that Sarah remarked was like, it's amazing how nobody's looking at her. Like they're all
because she blends in.
Yeah, they're all just like, oh, well, that's there. Like, but they're not even like swooning. Like, oh, ladies, because they're more like, oh, Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. But that sounds awesome, man.
So, the costumes were definitely cool and something fun to see.
I was going to say, I did see a guy with a shirt. I saw this online that said, if this shirt doesn't stink, I'm not gaming hard enough. Thought that was cool.
Cool. And we saw a black Luigi and Mario.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and
exactly.
Who cares, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing, is like, just let it all hang out, and like the joy of not having to in any way hold back. That sounds so contagious. I really do hope to be able to go. Well, let's move on a little bit into some of these sort of celebrities, quote unquote, that you hobnobbed with. You mentioned there's some developers there and some podcasts, internet celebrities that you got to hang out with.
Yeah, I got to meet a lot of the developers while I was going around giving out my CD. That's what I had to do. So
with your bloodshot eye.
With my bloodshot eye.
Did anyone comment on the bloodshot eye, by the way?
No, actually. Okay. I think most people either didn't notice it or were, like...
They thought it was part of your costume.
Exactly. I was just a rage zombie.
Yeah. Oh, dude, you should have just gone with it. Just
well,
vomit blood on the
I had a story eventually that I told somebody, but I'll get to that.
But yeah, I know you met the guys from the Behemoth.
Yeah, the guys from the Behemoth, and like I literally I approached them and I said, "Do you guys make video games?" They're like,
Awesome.
"Yeah," and I'm like, "I make music," and I handed them a CD. Now the cool thing was, you think these guys are gonna be like, "We're from the Behemoth, we don't need to talk to you." They're
Right.
like, "Oh, dude," and they like call back into like the booth behind them. They're like, "Hey, what's your name? Get out here!" And he's like, "This is our guy who handles music licensing, and this is your guy." And I'm like, "Oh, sweet." So I hand him it. He's like, "Yeah, like we're always like." What I didn't know about their games is that they don't have a composer.
Right.
They license music from people on Newgrounds, which I found this out at the show. Like, a lot of people were asking me if I was on Newgrounds. Apparently, that's a place for video game composers to put up their music and have it used.
Hot tip. Yeah.
Hot tip right there. So they were cool. I didn't get to meet the guy who did the dishwasher, but his booth was nearby. I knew he was there. I
Yeah,
met
did
the
you-
guy. However, like here's the cool thing. A lot of the people who make cool games
Yeah.
seem to be cool themselves,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
personable, engaging. Like they were all about talking to people. I met the guy who made a reckless
Right.
disregard for gravity.
Right.
He
another
was
indie
just going off like a comedian. He was just
Yeah.
anybody he could talk to. He was just standing there like. Going crazy, and like there
Sure.
were sort of like booth babes for him, but nobody cared. Like
game. Right. Yeah.
he's the show,
When you say the people who make cool games, are you talking about mostly like indie type games?
Well, there were a lot of indie games there.
Yeah.
So, and most of the developers who were on the floor were the makers of indie titles.
Right, yeah.
Like, for example, Red Dead Redemption was sort of the big floor space when you walked in.
Yeah.
And obviously nobody from Rockstar was really there representing it. They had sort of PR people.
Okay.
And so that was kind of impersonal. But there was like this Boston indie game contest
Mm-hmm.
area where people who just submitted games could go and like they won, and there was like the top 10 there.
Oh,
So I
nice.
got to talk with these people and give them my CD. And the neat thing was like, yeah, this guy who made this really cool game that's gotten a lot of critical acclaim turned out to be a cool guy. And I think one of the things that we've heard that I've heard mentioned about this game was that it has such a fun sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
and like it doesn't take itself seriously, and in that way it is serious.
Right.
For example, the guy was saying, like, in the game, there are 3 stories about how the game was made, and all of them are lies. Like,
Nice.
but then you'd see, like, this sort of crappy game
Right.
with crappy graphics, and you'd meet the guy, and he's, like, this really inverted kid, and
Yeah.
inverted. He's this really...
He has a chicken chest. It has a concave
his eyes are
chest.
glowing black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we, while we're on the subject of these indie game developers, just talk quickly about the indie games that you had a chance to play.
Yeah, I got to play which was really fun. Base jumping simulator, but with surprisingly crazy graphics. Like really, just it's like Matrixy type stuff, and that's one thing I didn't expect.
Yeah.
I got to play a game which was a 2D MMO that teaches its users to speak Chinese.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And they were kind
Do
of
you remember what it was
explaining
called?
how they did it. No, I mean, because it had like a Chinese name. But
Yeah.
you would walk up to like an NPC and click on him to give you a mission, and he would say like, help, I've lost my, and then it would have like a Chinese thing. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
I need you to get, and so there'd be a bit written in English and Chinese, and you'd have to hold your mouse over,
Right.
and it would pronounce the Chinese and then give you what the English translation was. So
Right. Yeah.
it was kind of neat, also kind of edutainment-y, so it was like,
Edutainment. I did notice there's a lot of these indie games tend to be 2D.
right.
And have really nice 2D art. It almost
Oh,
seems like the
man.
revival of like old school gaming in
Yeah,
indie
there was
games.
this one called Grapple Buggy,
Okay.
which was just mind-blowing how good it looked. It's by, what was it, Games Your Mom Likes or something like that. It's going to kill me because I can't remember this, but just looking at it, it was hard to believe it was an indie game because of the level of like, it was like hand-painted kind of artwork. It looked like Master Blaster, but like, you're like, okay, we're going to have a game where you drive a car. It has a grappling hook and you move around the environment sort of creatively that way. But rather than having like a, grappling hook like what Scorpion has or something, it was
Right.
like this liquid goo that it would shoot out like some sort of slug would, like, and attach.
Right.
And then the
Yeah.
neat thing is that visually, is cool, but also it factors in gameplay wise, because what you can do is you can like attach to something, then drive the opposite way, and it like kind of rubber bands. It goes, and then you release, and your car can be flung
Yes.
like up through. It was like, this is, whoa.
Yeah.
There was another one, Devil's Tuning Fork, based on the MC Escher picture.
Oh, okay.
It was neat because it was a game kind of like
Isn't that sort of like Echochrome, or the game where you have the...
no.
What's the game where you sort of draw the lines
That is
out? I can't
Echochrome, but this was a 3D game, but sort of like the Unseen Swan or whatever, where you
where you splatter paint
Exactly.
to determine your environment. Like, it starts off all white. Jeez, yeah, what is that called? It's like Unseen Swan. Something
Hidden Swan, something like that. This game, it's all black, but then you have this tuning fork, so you push a button and it goes boom, and then you'll see briefly
yes.
sort of like how like a bat sees with sonar.
Yeah, these are games I'm always envious of.
Yeah.
When the IGF Awards happens, which it did just recently happen at GDC, and there's all this, awesome 2D art, like you say, and I'm always like, man, and they give music awards and things too, but I'm always like, when will I get to play these? It's sort of like going to Sundance, where it's like, these movies are amazing. Unfortunately, they have no distributor yet,
Yeah.
When will I get to play them? I don't know. So that was cool that you got to actually play those.
Yeah, and you can find them. It's just you have to do a little extra work, and I think the sad thing is a lot of these guys don't have the distribution method to help them out, and slowly but surely, like, downloadable games are picking this
Right.
up. Like, our top games of last year were actually started off as indie games, and they're downloadable
Sure.
games, and
Yeah.
there's definitely this whole thing, and I think people are taking notice. There were people there from XNA who I got to talk to, and actually had like a sit down like conversation while the guy was eating his lunch about he helps out indie developers, and he was giving me advice. He's like, do you have a girlfriend or a wife? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you have.
He's like, don't.
No. He actually said the opposite. He was like, that's your number one priority. Make sure you have that down. Like, don't compromise that. Now, everything now revolves around rigorous scheduling. He's like, you
Right.
have to reserve an hour here, and then he's like, figure out when you can do it and do it, even when you don't feel like it. And he's like, write down what you were doing last, so when you come back, like, it was all this great advice that,
Wow, yeah.
that I knew of. This guy, like, I gave him my CD, but he was like, I already have a composer, but maybe I can pass this on to somebody. But he gave me so much good advice; it was really worth it. So that was just
awesome.
an example of like the neat people that were there.
Yeah. Just the community.
Yeah, like, and the fact that this guy, like, there was no, like, red tape between me and him. He's like, all right, I'm gonna go eat, actually. Can you walk over with me? And, like, we just sat over, like, at a table behind his booth, and he's, like, eating, like, Thai food while talking to me.
Awesome. So you got to have a lot of cool indie game experiences. I just wanted to move on real quick to a more corporate game experience that you asked about, I know you were asking me, like, well, what happened at PAX?
Yeah.
Partially because you were there on the floor, and I was looking at it from the aerial view of the internet, but somebody tried to steal the game Breach. Did you hear this?
Really?
Yeah,
because that
I know
game
you said
sucked.
Yeah, okay, I was going to give you a chance to comment on Breach. It's the guys who made like 6 Days in Fallujah, which got canceled. Well, there was a guy standing there with a laptop, and he was copying, apparently, the data from like the demo onto his laptop somehow. And he had copied 14 megabytes of the 2 gig demo, and they caught him. And so he actually spent some time in jail, like temporary time, and then posted bail. And his laptop, his modded Xbox. Now this should tell you something. His modded Xbox, his modded PSP, his modded DS were confiscated.
Man.
By police, and they're saying that it may lead to PAX, unfortunately, having a policy about laptops next year, which is something that BlizzCon already does have a policy against, because they're showing off, StarCraft betas and, Diablo betas, and they don't want people to snag them. So who knows what'll happen by that? But yeah, your thoughts on whether this game is actually worth stealing?
Okay, so that sucks. That guy came there with a purpose to steal, and that's not cool.
He's denying it, by the way.
He's ruining it for the rest of us, and he's definitely going against Will Wheaton's #1 rule, which I'm not going to state here.
Yeah. Wheaton's Law, yeah.
Wheaton's Law. But the thing about Breach, what's funny is that it was so terrible. Like, first of all, it's a $15 game, and at first people are like really touting that, like, because they're acting like it looks like this amazing AAA quality, like there's destructible environments and multiplayer, and like it turns out that's kind of all that there was, and
that's it.
These are guys who are so disconnected they attempted to make 6 Days in Fallujah, which is the real world recounting of this horrific, thing that happened during today's wartime.
Right, it got canceled.
Where actual like family members are like still mourning the loss, and it's like you guys are so ridiculous. And the great thing was I actually got to hear from one of these guys.
Right,
there was a guy who was dressed in riot gear, like army, like gonna shoot off some smoke grenades,
right,
yelling really loud about this game.
Yeah, and
the things he was yelling, like I was cracking up even while I was like I was playing the game, and the guy next to me was just like, okay, so you can see you can get these destructible giants, and then this guy's yelling in the corner, we're gonna teach you tactics that aren't just good for using in games, but using in real life.
Oh no!
How do you get out of a real life situation where 5 people are trying to gun you down?
Right.
Obviously, you can't run. And I'm just thinking in my head like, so what you're saying is you didn't make a game here.
That's one way to interpret it. Jeez, I'm thinking mothers hearing that and just being scared out of their minds. We're gonna teach you. This is what. Like the 700
when
Club
you get shot
feared.
in our game, you literally die.
Yeah, this is what Pat Robertson fears is happening, is that there's some guy shouting to your children.
Right, like that's the thing. It was like, I guess after Jack Thomas got disbarred, then these guys were like, now's our chance. Well, let's make that murder simulator he's been claiming we have been making.
I thought it was a nice move that Will Wheaton edited his PAX 07 speech, or whatever it was, to include the fact that no one cares anymore about Jack Thompson.
Yeah.
He's been disbarred. I thought that was kind of cool. Wow. So I guess that's the corporate developer.
Yeah, I mean, you got to see the full span. There were people who were there for the love of it and really just having fun. There was just the corporate greed, like a Dante's Inferno booth for no reason. They're like, dude, this game is out already. Why?
I saw the cosplay though. That was pretty nice.
Oh, I actually didn't get to see that.
Yeah, the guy dressed as Dante. Geez, he might have even just been a guy, but I'm pretty sure he was in the booth. Had the giant like spinal cord scythe in his hand, and I was like, that thing must have been hard to make.
That's the cool part about this too. Is like you can't tell the fans from the professionals.
Yeah. At what point are all these weapons going to be like not allowed? Like all these fake like nunchucks and stuff. I was at the zoo once, and a bunch of cosplayers showed up for like Renfest. They were some of them had like actual like medieval weaponry, and I'm like, is anybody concerned? Because there's no like metal detector at the zoo. I don't know. So it was like it was sort of a weird.
Guess the incentive is if one person attacks, then they're surrounded by other people with weapons who will attack, which would be awesome to see actually like take place.
Well, it was interesting at the zoo, just real quick, because there was like Amish people there too that day in like masses.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like Renfest / Amish Day, and it made me wonder if they were like natural enemies, in the wild, where you might have an all-out battle would take place. I don't know.
Or natural allies. Nah.
Oh, there you go. A guy could just like lob his like medieval sword into like the tiger cage if he wanted to, and I was like, at some point this will be banned,
Right.
But in the meantime, he's just playing the pan flute and being like, "Oh, don't pity me," As people back away slowly. Anyway, so let's talk about concerts. You got to see some Muzak since you are a musician.
Yeah, I got to go to a concert, and there were multiple concerts there, but I only was able to stomach just because I was very tired and sleep deprived, which are the same thing, and bloodshot and hungry, and had a
Oh, was the food? I always wondered this: is con food like? Can you get it? Do you have to leave to go to outside restaurants or what?
Well, you could do both, but honestly, the food at this place was really impressive. Like, I wasn't even hungry after on Sunday
Right.
when I was actually there, like on the floor. But the food that people were eating, like you're like, man, does that burger have like blue cheese and like
Nice.
artisan bread or whatever? You're like,
Yeah. I'm loving that new Wendy's blue cheeseburger. Sorry, bacon and blue. That bacon is good.
I gotta stay away from that.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah. So you were at concerts, 2 concerts specifically. Right?
I mean, I will tell you real quick though. While in Boston, I did. We met up with one of Sarah's friends up there, and we went to a bar.
Right.
Because we were asking what's something very Boston-y to do.
Right. Sure.
And he was like, well, let's go to a bar. And Sarah was like, is there anything more Boston to do
Yeah.
than a bar?
Bars are sort of everywhere.
Well,
sir.
the funny thing was that turned into like a rhetorical question, which was like, is there anything more Boston than going to a bar?
Oh,
like,
wow.
Yeah. But like I had this burger there that had pulled pork with Guinness barbecue sauce on it. And I was like, oh, man. Like,
that sounds good.
It was
That
very
sounds
good. So
yeah. So but getting back to the concerts,
Yes.
you got to see 2 concerts. I know you told me.
Really, yeah. By far, the best thing that I saw was actually, let's start with the worst thing I saw. These 2 guys,
Sure.
I forget what they were called, Scott and somebody. They were going to go on before Jonathan Colton.
Right.
And this was already late. This was like 11 o'clock. I didn't get to see Joe Coe because he
Right.
didn't go on until like midnight or something from what I understood. And I was already exhausted. And my
Yeah.
girlfriend was exhausted. So
Darn shame.
yeah, but these guys, they were funny, they were cool, they had a song that was a blatant ripoff of They Might Be Giants, and they admitted to it.
Oh, okay.
It was a blatant ripoff of They Might Be Giants song, but it was funny because they were like, now we'll sing the praises of December 23rd. It's the day before the day before the day before the best day in the world. So it was kind of
That's cool.
They were clever. They did this really cool thing where they just started into this Gregorian chant without any sort of tone or pitch. So I guess they
Right.
as a musician, I was really impressed. But
Yeah.
it was also
So
kinda
this is
hammy.
the worst thing you saw was these 2
Well,
dudes?
the bad thing was like there was shoddy sort of production about it. Like they
Right.
tried to queue up a song on their iPod and it wasn't working. Or
Ugh.
one thing was like they started to joke with the audience, and like the audience would go "Aw," and like at everything, and so the audience kept doing it. But eventually they sort of got mad at the audience for like playing along, and were like sort of making
Never a good idea to turn on your audience.
Never a good idea.
Never a good. I've been to a show where the guy was like, "Why aren't more people moving around?" Instant like way to separate yourself from the crowd, you know?
So they were good, but they weren't so good that I stayed to see them.
Sure.
But
the best
group
one.
on before them, I did stay to see.
Yeah.
And that was the Video Games Orchestra, or VGO.
Sounds perfect.
Perfect for me, especially. I ate this up. Got there, and they were performing like Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, and like everything. They had a guitarist who was like their arranger off to the side, and he would introduce every song. But he was like a Japanese guy, so he would always just sort of go like, "How many of you play Final Fantasy?"
Yes.
And people would be like,
Yeah.
and then it's like, "Here's a song, battle theme from Final Fantasy VII, okay?"
Yeah.
And, like, yeah. And then they start like,
Now, so this is an orchestra, like strings.
yeah,
and
it's an
everything?
orchestra, strings, piano, organ. Like they had guitars and bass and
Awesome.
drums and hand percussion, full on like everything.
That's awesome.
And man, yeah, it was sweet. But while they're like doing these songs, and people, like everybody's dancing to them, and like people are fist pumping at specific cues,
Right.
like the "huh" I talked about.
Yeah.
Like it's going crazy. And about the time that the Chocobo theme comes on,
Right.
and everybody's laughing and having fun, it dawns on me why I want to make music for video games.
Right.
And sort of this broader thing about PAX, which was that everybody there wasn't reacting to kind of the quirkiness of the music itself. You know, it's a quirky tune, the Chocobo theme.
Right.
But more so, they were thinking of all the fun of riding atop this giant yellow bird.
Right.
You know, or the one that's hidden in the afro of the guy in the latest one. You know?
Yeah.
Like, they're thinking about this character that all these people from all around the country have all met and have all had fun with.
Right.
and this theme music that represents that.
Yeah, it ties it to like the emotion. It ties it to the time. And music has always been that way, I think, where it can just jog instantly like a certain memory.
Yeah, and I think with such immersive experiences as games provide...
Yeah, it can only be better, right?
Yeah, I mean, somebody could play something from Avatar, and I would be like, yay, but I wouldn't really be as invested as it is when Eris's theme plays,
and
everyone people will get teary-eyed,
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just recently watching gads of YouTube replays of Final Fantasy VII, which, by the way, the graphics totally don't hold up, but the story still does, I think.
Yeah.
And there's the part where Eris says, right whenever they first leave Midgar, she says, "I've never been outside the city. I'll need someone to protect me. Will you be my bodyguard?" And Cloud's saying, "Yeah." And it's just it's soul crushing,
Yeah, absolutely. So cool. They ended with the Metal Gear Solid theme, which was...
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
That's so great. That original trailer from E3 of Metal Gear Solid, it's like a 9-minute long trailer where it just keeps getting more and more cinematic.
Yeah.
It's Harry Gregson Williams, right? It's an actual music composer, film composer.
Right. And beautiful stuff, and they launch into it right after they finished with the girl singing the Snake Eater theme, so it was just
cool.
all this geekdom nerdiness and
awesome, all shared experiences in a auditorium full of people. There was a balcony full of people. It was packed, and everybody knew it and was into it. Yeah.
So that was the moment that I realized, dude, PAX isn't about press releases or news or anything. It was about people and about our shared experiences and what brought us all together, which was this love for games and fantasy and just whatever, So it was really neat.
What else can we add to that? Perfect way to end it, I'd say. And before we close out our show, we always like to get nostalgic. This week, though, we have a special treat. Which is that Rob actually went around and asked, rather than asking me, he asked various web-lebrities, or whatever you would call them, 2 podcasts that we both love. In fact, I would say they're my 2 favorite, which is Mega 64 and the Idle Thumbs podcast. For those of you who listen, you know how much we love those shows. And Rob asked the guys from Mega 64 and the guys from Idle Thumbs this question of the week, which I'll let you state.
Basically what I asked them... kind of to get their nostalgia juices flowing was, let's say I gave you a time machine and $1 billion, right? Mm-hmm. You can go back in time and save a aborted project from becoming vaporware.
Yep.
And the example I gave, and the example you may hear me giving, depending on how we edit this, is the Matsushita 3DO M2. Mm-hmm. Which was a console that you and I were both very much anticipating.
Right, and I love how none of them really knew what it was.
Right, and but it was something that we always wanted, and it never could happen. And so that was something if I had enough money, I would go back and make that happen.
Right.
And make it fully realized with my $1 billion from the future.
Yeah.
But so it was interesting hearing what people had to say, and so now we're going to listen to that. And
I'm going to actually go ahead and just say that if you want to email us and tell us your answer to that question, you may do so. Our email address, as always, is mail@growing-up-geek.com. You can follow us throughout the week on Twitter at twitter.com/GUGBrad and GUGRob. And we're just going to let this audio play us out of the show. And thank you for listening. Some of this audio may not be great, but we're just going to let...
I was at a bar for one of them, and the other one was in a noisy convention center. So please forgive. We did not have time to build a sound studio while we were there.
That's right. So I think the first guy you're going to hear here is Jake Rodkin and Chris Remo from Idle Thumbs, and then moving on into Rocco and Sean from Mega 64. But thank you once again for listening. My name is Brad.
I am Rob.
And we out.
Yeah, the thing that I would probably save is the Terry Gilliam film of Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's book Good Omens, which was going to be made and was shut down 10 years ago. Neil Gaiman, Terry Pratchett, and Terry Gilliam is a tough trio to deny in sort of dorky things all teaming up. But in terms of games, I don't really know. 6 years ago, I would have have said Sam and Max freelance police at LucasArts.
Yeah.
But now I'm working at the company that only exists because that was canceled.
Well, there you go.
So I would be happy to play Duke Nukem Forever. I was sort of excited about that game.
Yeah.
Like the day that it died, I was like, I knew that'll happen, but maybe it would have been good. But I don't know if I would have given them $1 billion. I don't know. What's yours?
I don't know. I guess like maybe the Matsushita M2, like the 3DO M2. Do you remember that thing?
No, I didn't care about those.
Not at all.
I never had a 3DO or a CDI. I thought they were weird.
So, well, that's the thing is like I never had one either, and so they were always the most awesome video game console ever.
I thought that was going to be the case, and then I bought Burn Cycle on the PC, and it was ridiculous. And I was like, oh, that's what everyone's talking about? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. What about you? If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said Warcraft Adventures. Oh, yeah. Right. When I started writing about games, it was in the graphic adventure coverage community, right? So I was all into the old LucasArts games, Sierra stuff to some extent, some of the smaller guys like Revolution Software. I was really into 2D point-and-click graphic adventures. And I also loved strategy games. So I played Warcraft, Warcraft 2, StarCraft, and they were making Warcraft Adventures, which was a hand-animated 2D graphic adventure. And I'm like, this is exactly what I want. Right. Blizzard making an adventure game. And I at the time, back in the 90s, I subscribed to both Computer Gaming World and PC Gamer, and I'd follow the previews of this game, month by month. Yeah. And when it was canceled, I was totally distraught. I was really disappointed. Now, the thing is, that's why this is a hard question for me. Yeah. Now, knowing what I do about the industry, I recognize there are probably good reasons that game got canceled, and it probably was not as good as I assumed it was in 1998 or whatever. Yeah. So, not the same case with like StarCraft Ghost or anything like that? I've played StarCraft Ghost, and it was kind of fun, but it's not a huge loss. I don't know. If they're going to go to a new platform, I'm sure they want a game that is just amazing. Yeah. And that probably was not it. All right. Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rocco Bodie from Mega 64. I'm 200 pounds, solid muscle, and sexy just all over.
I agree.
Thank you. If I could save one aborted project from becoming vaporware, is that it? Yeah. I would have given, I don't know if this counts, whatever, but I would have given Desert Bus a much larger release than what we saw. I think Desert Bus would have been a tremendous success, both on a retail level. I mean, imagine a downloadable Desert Bus. You play it, turn your Xbox on, play away, run it all night. Why not? I'm down.
So that's just Desert Bus, not Penn and Teller Smoke and Mirrors?
No, screw those guys. I just want the bus.
You just want the bus. And have like an online feature where it automatically gives the money to charity the longer you play it?
No, screw charity. I just want to play the game.
All right, so we're rescuing Desert Bus then. Yeah. Cool. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, hey, I'm Sean from Mega 64. And if I could go back in time and save something, it'd be the Jaguar. It had a lot of buttons. I remember being a kid holding that thing and being like, I don't know, it's like, I think there's the alphabet on it as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And it was, so yeah, that needs to be back because I like complicated things. So I'm a complicated guy. I have I'm unique.
No, nothing. I mean, I can remember like the Jaguar being this. It was so expensive that I could never have it.
Oh yeah, I couldn't have it either.
So clearly, it still is in my brain the most amazing system ever.
Oh yeah.
Even though I've heard it's bad, I don't believe it.
My rich friend had one, and I remember, going to his house just to play it, and then just being like overwhelmed by it because I couldn't figure it out, and he was destroying me at everything that he did. So yeah, I played it that one time, but let's bring that back, guys. Yeah. Who made that? I don't even know who made that.
Atari.
Atari made that?
Yeah.
Atari, where are you at? Let's do this.
And I think they were planning a Jaguar CD, like attachment that would.
Oh, that'd be sick.
That would be successful.
Yeah. You know? What if all of a sudden, like today, a new Jaguar came out? Like, I'd buy it.
With an Atari Lynx that came in the package.
Let's do it. Atari. I'm gonna email everyone who's listening to this. Email Atari and say, "Where's my new Jaguar at?" I was promised one from Sean.
We need more consoles named after cats.
Yeah. Give me the Panther. Where's the Panther?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They should sue Apple and recoup that money and make stuff happen. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. And that's the go. All right.